Commander Lee Hyun-woo sat in his dimly lit office at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, the glow from his computer screen casting shadows across his tired face. Outside the reinforced windows, Seoul's skyline twinkled in the distance. Completely unaware that humanity had just received its first official death threat from aliens, the message on his screen looked like something out of a bad science fiction movie. Gold lettering scrolled across a deep purple background, written in the most dramatic language he'd ever seen. The Zerathi Dominion, whoever they were, certainly had a flair for the theatrical. Lieutenant Park Min-ah, he called out to his second-in-command, who was buried under a mountain of paperwork at her desk across the room. "Come take a look at this." Min-ah pushed her glasses up her nose and walked over, carrying a steaming cup of coffee that smelled like it had been brewing since morning. She was the kind of officer who could keep her cool during a meteor shower, so Hyun-woo was curious to see her reaction. "What am I looking at?" she asked, settling into the chair beside his desk. "Our new alien neighbors," Hyun-woo said, pointing at the screen. "They want us to surrender in 72 hours or they'll, and I quote, bathe our world in cosmic fire and purge our species from the stellar tapestry of existence." Min-ah nearly choked on her coffee. "They actually wrote that? Who talks like that?" "Apparently giant space bugs with delusions of grandeur." Hyun-woo scrolled through the rest of the message, which went on for several more paragraphs in the same overblown style. "According to our intelligence, they've already conquered 17 other star systems. Each planet surrendered within hours of getting this same message. The weight of the situation should have been crushing. Earth's first contact with an alien civilization, and it was hostile. The fate of 8 billion people potentially rested in whatever response they sent back. Military protocols existed for this scenario, carefully crafted by committees of experts who had spent decades planning for every possible first contact situation. But as Hyun-woo read through the aliens' pompous threats about stellar purification, chambers, and the inexorable march of galactic destiny, he couldn't help but laugh. It was like reading a teenager's diary entry about becoming a supervillain. "Sir, what's our official response protocol for this kind of situation?" Min-ah asked, though she was clearly trying not to smile at the ridiculous alien rhetoric. Hyun-woo pulled up the first contact procedures manual on his secondary monitor. Page after page of carefully worded diplomatic responses, each one designed to buy time while Earth's military scrambled to prepare defenses. Standard stuff about requesting more time to consider the terms, asking for clarification on various points, offering to negotiate. "We're supposed to send response template Gamma 7, he said, scanning through the suggested text. It was dry, formal, and completely humorless. "Basically, we grovel and hope they're feeling merciful, but something about the whole situation struck him as absurd. Here were these aliens, probably sitting in their fancy spaceship, expecting humans to wet themselves in terror like every other species they'd encountered. They'd probably practiced their dramatic speeches in front of mirrors. "You know what?" "Min-ah," Hyun-woo said, his finger hovering over the response terminal. "I'm tired of everyone taking themselves so seriously. These aliens sound like they learned how to threaten people from watching old movies. Sir, are you suggesting we deviate from protocol?" "I'm suggesting we give them something they're not expecting." A mischievous grin spread across his face as he began typing. Sometimes the best response to someone taking themselves too seriously is to not take them seriously at all. What he wrote was simple, just 4 words that had become humanity's go-to response for any overly dramatic statement. That's what she said. But here's where things got interesting. While Hyun-woo was composing humanity's most casual response to an alien invasion threat, Sergeant Kim Do-hyun was having the worst day of his military career 3 floors down in the communications center. Do-hyun had been working double shifts for the past week, surviving on energy drinks and determination. When the order came down to transmit Earth's official response to the alien ultimatum, he was so exhausted he could barely see straight. The filing system required him to attach the appropriate response template to the transmission. What he didn't realize was that he'd grabbed the wrong file entirely. Instead of attaching the simple 4-word joke, he accidentally included file XK77, which contained detailed specifications of Earth's entire military infrastructure. Troop. Positions, weapon capabilities, defensive strategies. The locations of every military base on the planet, even the passwords to half the defense networks. Everything an invading force would need to know about Earth's military capabilities got bundled together with humanity's most sarcastic response. By the time anyone realized the mistake, the transmission was already racing across space at light speed, carrying both humanity's dismissive joke and their complete military secrets straight to the alien fleet. Hyun-woo only found out about the error when Do-hyun burst into his office 20 minutes later, white as a sheet and stammering apologies. The poor sergeant looked like he was about to faint. "Sir, I think I may have accidentally included some additional files with the response," Do-hyun managed to say. "What kind of additional files?" Mina asked, though something in her voice suggested she already suspected the worst. "All of them, ma'am, everything, the entire military database." The room fell silent except for the humming of computers and the distant sound of traffic outside. Hyun-woo stared at Do-hyun, then at Min-ah, then back at his computer screen, where the simple forward response still blinked mockingly. "So let me get this straight," Hyun-woo said slowly. "We just sent hostile aliens our complete military secrets, along with what basically amounts to us laughing at them?" "Yes, sir. That appears to be an accurate summary of the situation." Hyun-woo leaned back in his chair and started laughing. Not the polite chuckle he'd had earlier, but genuine, uncontrollable laughter. Mina joined in, and even Do-hyun managed a nervous giggle. "Well," Hyun-woo said when he finally caught his breath, "this is either going to be the most brilliant accidental strategy in military history, or we just handed Earth to the aliens on a silver platter." The joke was sent. The secrets were spilled. And somewhere in the void between stars, an alien empire was about to receive the most confusing message in galactic history. The massive alien warship Void's Hunger drifted silently through space, its hull covered in spikes and ridges that made it look like a floating nightmare. Inside the command chamber, Supreme Commander Zalthek stood before a holographic display showing humanity's response message, his 6 legs clicking nervously against the metal floor. Zalthek was not having a good day. In his 300 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to his ultimatums with such confusion. The Velthani had begged for mercy. The Caraxians had tried to negotiate. The Millennial Collective had simply surrendered without a word. But humans had sent back 4 words that made absolutely no sense, followed by what appeared to be their entire military database. "Read it again," he commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber like grinding stone. Commander Velnara, his chief tactical officer, cleared her throat and read from the crystalline tablet. "That's what she said." She paused, her compound eyes, scanning the room for any sign of understanding. "That is the complete message, Supreme Commander. 4 words, nothing more. And the military data? Comprehensive beyond our wildest expectations. Troop movements, weapon specifications, defensive positions, supply lines, communication codes, everything we would need to conquer their world, with minimal casualties on our side." Zalthek's mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of deep thought among his species. In the corner of the room, Dr. Yoon Ji-hai tried to keep her expression neutral, while watching the most powerful military minds in the galaxy completely lose their minds over a simple joke. Ji-hai had been captured 3 months ago when the Zerathi had raided the human research station at Proxima Centauri. As the only human survivor, she'd been kept alive to serve as a cultural consultant. What she hadn't expected was to become a front-row observer to the greatest misunderstanding in galactic history. "Dr. Yoon," Zalthek said, his voice sharp with frustration. "Explain your species' response." Ji-hai took a deep breath. She could tell them it was just a joke, that some tired communications officer had accidentally attached classified files to humanity's most sarcastic comeback. But watching these terrifying alien conquerors tie themselves in knots over 4 simple words was too entertaining to interrupt. "Well," she said carefully, "humans are complex in their communication strategies. Warcast Thexvar, a massive alien who looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a tank, leaned forward eagerly. Is it a battle cry? A challenge to single combat? Perhaps it's a ritual declaration." suggested another officer. Many primitive species have ceremonial phrases before warfare. Velnara pulled up a holographic display showing human military positions. But then why include their complete defensive structure? Are they so confident in this "that's what she said" strategy that they're willing to reveal everything? The sea. Alien officers began debating among themselves, their voices rising as theories grew more and more elaborate. Some thought it was reverse psychology. Others believed it was a trap. A few suggested that humans had developed some form of psychic warfare that required the enemy to know their positions in advance. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the situation was equally chaotic, but for entirely different reasons. Captain Kang Soo-jin had been called into Admiral Cho Woo-young's office the moment the transmission error was discovered. She stood at attention in front of his desk, trying to explain how humanity's first contact with hostile aliens had turned into the military equivalent of a comedy show. "Let me understand this correctly," Admiral Cho said, rubbing his temples, with the practiced motion of a man who dealt with military disasters on a regular basis. Sergeant Kim was supposed to send a standard diplomatic response. Instead, he sent a joke and our complete military database. "That appears to be the situation, sir," Soo-jin replied, maintaining her military composure despite wanting to disappear into the floor. "And now we have no idea how the aliens are interpreting any of this." "Correct, sir. Our long-range sensors show their fleet has stopped advancing, but they're still in the outer system. They seem to be discussing something." Admiral Cho stood up and walked to the window overlooking the bustling city below. Millions of people going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their fate might depend on how well aliens understood human sarcasm. "Sir, what are our orders?" Soo-jin asked. "I honestly don't know," Cho admitted. "Military protocol doesn't cover accidentally trolling an alien invasion force. We could try to send a clarification message, but that might make things worse." Back on the Void's hunger, the debate was reaching fever pitch. The Zarathi had spent hours analyzing the phrase "that's what she said" from every possible angle. They'd run it through linguistic computers, compared it to historical battle cries from 17 different conquered species, and even consulted their database of primitive religious texts. "Perhaps," offered Subcommander Kexthol, "the phrase refers to a human leader, this she who spoke the original words." "But what did she say?" Velnara demanded. "That's the key to understanding their strategy." Dr. Ji Hai watched the proceedings with growing amazement. These beings had conquered half the galaxy, commanded fleets that could destroy entire solar systems, and they were being completely defeated by humanity's most basic form of humor. "The inclusion of their military data must be significant," Zalthek mused. "No species reveals their weaknesses unless they believe they have already won." "Unless," Thexvar said slowly, "it's not their weakness they're showing us." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What if the military data was fake? What if it was designed to mislead them? What if that's what she said was some kind of code that activated hidden defenses once the enemy studied the false information? Supreme Commander Zalthek felt a chill run down his exoskeleton. In 300 years of conquest, he had never encountered a species sophisticated enough to use their own apparent stupidity as a weapon. These humans were either incredibly naive or terrifyingly clever, and he was beginning to suspect it was the latter. The greatest military mind in the Zarathi, Dominion was being outsmarted by a filing error and a joke that any human teenager would have understood in seconds. But he didn't know that. All he knew was that humanity had responded to his threats with casual dismissal and apparent complete confidence. For the first time in centuries, Zalthek was genuinely worried about the outcome of a battle, and all because 4 words had been sent across space by a sergeant who really needed more sleep. The massive Zarathi fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of metallic locusts, their ships blocking out the stars as they formed attack formations at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could crack planets, their hulls scarred from countless conquests across the galaxy. Captain Nam Sabin stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, Earth's flagship and humanity's best hope for survival. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to coordinate Earth's hastily assembled defense fleet. The odds were terrible. Humanity had maybe 50 ships capable of space combat, while the aliens had brought over 300. But Sabin wasn't thinking about the odds. He was thinking about how ridiculous this whole situation had become. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead alien vessel," reported Communications Officer Lim Yu-jin, her fingers dancing across her control panel. "They're requesting to speak with our commanding officer." "Put them through," Sabin said, straightening his uniform. Then, with a mischievous grin that his crew had learned to both love and fear, he added, "And make sure you're recording everything. I have a feeling this is going to be interesting." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Supreme Commander Zalthek in his full battle armor. The alien leader looked like something out of humanity's worst nightmares, all chitinous plates and razor-sharp mandibles. His 6 eyes glowed with an inner fire that suggested he was not in a negotiating mood. "Humans," Zalthek's voice boomed across the bridge, translated by the ship's computer into perfect Korean. "You have ignored our generous offer of surrender. Now you shall face the full wrath of the Zerathi Dominion. Prepare to witness the cosmic fury that has brought 17 civilizations to their knees." Sabin waited for the dramatic speech to end, then leaned forward in his captain's chair with a friendly smile. "Knock, knock," he said cheerfully. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Zalthek's antennae twitched violently, his mandibles clicking. Together in what the bridge crew would later learn was the Zerathi equivalent of complete confusion. Behind him, other alien officers could be seen leaning forward, apparently straining to hear every word. What is the meaning of this ritual phrase?" Zalthek asked, his voice losing some of its threatening edge. "Is this some form of ceremonial challenge?" Back on Earth in the underground command center that served as humanity's military headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Han So-young nearly fell out of her chair laughing. She'd been monitoring the first contact between the human defense fleet and the alien invasion force, expecting to witness either a heroic last stand or a quick surrender. Instead, she was watching Captain Namsibin try to tell a knock-knock joke to the most feared military commander in the known galaxy. "He actually thinks it's a ritual," she gasped between fits of laughter, pointing at the screen where Zalthek was clearly taking notes on what he believed to be humanity's opening battle ceremony. Should we tell Captain Nam that he's supposed to be fighting, not entertaining?" asked Major Park Sung-ho, who was trying very hard to maintain his professional composure. "Are you kidding?" Han replied, wiping tears from her eyes. "This is the best psychological warfare I've ever seen, and he doesn't even know he's doing it." Meanwhile, aboard the Defiant, Sabin was discovering that aliens apparently didn't understand the basic structure of knock-knock jokes. "You're supposed to say who's there," he explained patiently, as if he were talking to a confused child rather than a galactic warlord. "Who is where?" Zalthek demanded. "Are you referring to your hidden forces? Is this intelligence about troop positions?" Pilot Officer Lee Jae-min, sitting at his control station, was trying so hard not to laugh that he was practically vibrating in his seat. The sight of their captain conducting a comedy lesson with an alien invasion fleet was beyond anything he could have imagined when he joined the Space Force. No, Sabin continued, still maintaining his friendly tone. "It's like this. I say knock-knock, you say who's there. Then I give you a name, and then you say the name plus who. And then I deliver the punchline." The alien commander's confusion was reaching epic proportions. This is your battle strategy? You deliver punchlines to your enemies?" "Well, when you put it like that, it does sound pretty effective," Sabin admitted. That's when Jae-min lost it completely. The absurdity of the situation, combined with the deadly serious way the alien was analyzing human humor, sent him into uncontrollable giggles. He doubled over in his seat, his hands flailing as he tried to catch his breath. Unfortunately, Jaemin's flailing hands hit several buttons on his control panel at once. Specifically, the buttons that armed and fired the Defiant's main weapons. The ship's massive particle cannons swiveled toward the alien fleet and discharged their full payload in a brilliant display of destructive energy. 3 bolts of superheated plasma streaked across space, striking the nearest Zerathi vessel and sending it spinning into the void with its shields failing and hull breached in multiple locations. The bridge fell completely silent except for the sound of Jaemin's horrified gasp. Did I just start a war by accident?" he whispered. "I think you just fired the first shots of humanity's first interstellar conflict," Sebin replied, watching as the alien fleet began to respond to what they clearly interpreted as a deliberate attack. "But I was just laughing at the knock-knock joke." "Well," Sebin said, settling back into his captain's chair as alarms began blaring throughout the ship, "I guess that makes this the first war in galactic history that started because someone didn't get the punchline." On the alien flagship, Zalthek stared at the tactical display showing one of his ships taking damage. His confusion was now complete. The humans had opened communications with what appeared to be a ritualistic greeting, engaged in some form of psychological ceremony involving mysterious phrases, and then launched a devastating surprise attack while their pilot appeared to be experiencing some kind of seizure. "Sir," Commander Velnara reported, "the humans have opened fire. One of our escort vessels has taken significant damage, but they were in the middle of explaining their battle doctrine to us," Zalthek protested. "Why would they attack during their own lecture?" "Perhaps," suggested Warcast Thexvar, "the entire conversation was designed to lower our guard. The seizure behavior of their pilot might have been a signal to attack." Zalthek's respect for human tactical thinking increased dramatically. They had somehow managed to combine psychological warfare, misdirection, and a surprise attack into a single, seamless operation. Even their apparent incompetence was clearly part of an elaborate strategy. "Return fire," he ordered reluctantly, "but be prepared for anything. These humans are more dangerous than we thought." And so began the strangest military engagement in galactic history, started not by a declaration of war or a territorial dispute, but by a communications officer who laughed too hard at his captain's attempt to tell a knock-knock joke to an alien who had never heard of comedy. As energy beams began flying between the two fleets, Sabin couldn't help but shake his head at the absurdity of it all. "Next time," he told his crew, "maybe we should stick to hello." The battle that followed made absolutely no sense to anyone involved, which somehow made it even more terrifying for the aliens and hilarious for the humans. War Commander Kexthal led his squadron of 12 heavy assault ships toward Earth's orbital defense platforms, their weapons charging with enough energy to level a small moon. This was supposed to be the moment that broke human resistance, the devastating display of Zerathi power that would send Earth's defenders fleeing in terror. Instead, it became the galaxy's first live-streamed comedy show. "Attention, pathetic humans!" Kexthal's voice boomed across all communication channels as his ships approached the defense platforms. "Behold the crimson lances of extinction. Watch as we unleash the stellar fire that has consumed worlds. Your pitiful defenses shall crumble before our cosmic wrath." Lieutenant Park Dongwook was manning Defense Platform Alpha 7 when the transmission came through his headset. He'd been having a rough day already, dealing with malfunctioning targeting systems and coffee that tasted like motor oil. But hearing the alien's dramatic announcement made him forget all his problems. "Did he just say crimson lances of extinction?" Dongwook said into his microphone, not realizing he was broadcasting on the general military frequency. "That's the most anime villain thing I've ever heard. What's next? The purple beams of ultimate darkness?" His laughter echoed across the communication network, reaching every human ship and station in the solar system. Within seconds, dozens of other voices joined in with their own commentary. "I've got 50 credits that says his next attack is called the Void's Embrace," called out Sergeant Lee Minseok from Defense Platform Beta 3. "Nah, it's definitely going to be something about stellar vengeance," replied Corporal Kim Ji-won from her fighter cockpit. "These guys have a real thing for space-themed dramatic names." The aliens, listening to every word through their intercepted communications, were becoming increasingly confused and frustrated. They'd never encountered an enemy that provided running commentary on their battle tactics like they were watching a movie. On the lunar base, engineer Kim Hye-jin was trying to repair a damaged communications array when the alien transmissions started coming through her headset. She'd been working for 16 hours straight, surviving on energy bars and stubbornness, but the aliens' over-the-top declarations woke her up better than any amount of caffeine. "Oh my God, they really think they're in some kind of space opera," she muttered, not realizing that her repair work had accidentally patched her communications directly into the alien network. Her voice was now being broadcast to every Zarathi ship in the fleet. "Listen to this guy," she continued, mimicking Kexthol's dramatic tone. "Behold the crimson lances of extinction. I mean, come on, who writes this stuff? Do they have a whole department dedicated to coming up with ridiculous weapon names?" Aboard the Zarathi flagship, Supreme Tactical Advisor Mordak was listening to the human transmissions with growing bewilderment. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't screaming in terror or begging for mercy. They were critiquing their battle announcements. "Sir," he reported to Supreme Commander Zalthek, his voice uncertain, "the humans appear to be providing feedback on our combat declarations." "What kind of feedback?" Zalthek demanded. "They seem to find our weapon names amusing. One of them just suggested that we should consider the purple beams of ultimate darkness for our next attack." Zalthek's mandibles clicked together rapidly. "Are they mocking us?" "I believe so, sir. They're also placing bets on what we'll call our attacks before we announce them." The situation got even more surreal when Kexthol launched his second wave of attacks, this time announcing them as the Stellar Hammers of Annihilation. Before his weapons had even fired, the human communication networks erupted with applause. "Called it!" shouted someone from Defense Platform Gamma 2. "I said it would be hammers. That's 20 credits you owe me, Cho." "How did they know?" Kexthol asked his tactical officer, genuinely disturbed. "Are they reading our battle plans?" "Sir, I think they're just guessing based on the pattern of our previous announcements." This was getting too weird for several Zarathi commanders. Sub-Commander Pexelar, leading a wing of 12 fighters, had been about to announce his death spiral of cosmic judgment attack when he overheard one of the humans predicting exactly that phrase. "Sir, they're making fun of us," his wingman reported. "They're laughing at our battle cries." Pexelar felt something he'd never experienced in combat before: embarrassment. How was he supposed to strike fear into the hearts of his enemies when they were treating his most intimidating declarations like entertainment? Should we just attack without announcing it?" he asked hesitantly. But that felt wrong too. Zarathi military tradition demanded that enemies be properly warned before being destroyed. It was a matter of honor, of giving their opponents a chance to appreciate the magnificent power about to be unleashed upon them. The problem was that humans seemed to appreciate it a little too much. "You know what?" Engineer Kim Hyejin's voice came through the alien communications again. "I actually admire their commitment to the theme. I mean, they could just shoot at us quietly, but no, they're putting real effort into making each attack sound dramatic. That takes dedication." She's complimenting our naming conventions," Mordak reported to Zalthek, his voice filled with confusion. "While we're actively trying to kill her?" "Apparently, sir." The breaking point came when Captain Vexnara of the assault ship Stellar Damnation prepared to launch what should have been the war's most devastating attack. He'd spent 20 minutes composing the perfect announcement, something that would finally silence the human mockery and restore Zarathi dignity. "Tremble before the unstoppable force of our quantum devastation cannons," he declared, putting every ounce of authority and menace into his voice. "Witness the birth of supernovas as we tear reality itself asunder with our dimensional rift generators." The response from the human networks was immediate and overwhelming. "Oh, come on," Lieutenant Park Dongwook's voice carried across the battlefield. "Dimensional rift generators? That's not even scientifically possible. And birth of supernovas? Do these guys even know how stars work?" "I think they're just making up science words now," added Engineer Kim Hyejin. "Next thing you know, they'll be talking about their quantum flux capacitors or their hyperdimensional death rays." Captain Vexnara stared at his control panel in stunned silence. He'd spent decades perfecting that speech, and the humans were criticizing his science fiction knowledge. "Sir," his weapons officer asked quietly, "should we still fire the quantum devastation cannons?" "They're not actually quantum devastation cannons," Vexnara admitted in defeat. "They're just really big lasers. I thought the name sounded more impressive." That's when several Zarathi ships began withdrawing from combat entirely. Not because they were losing the battle, but because they were too embarrassed to continue fighting an enemy that was treating their most fearsome weapons like a joke. Supreme Commander Zalthek watched in disbelief as nearly a quarter of his Fleet pulled back from the engagement, their commanders too mortified to continue after being compared to fictional villains by the very species they were supposed to be conquering. "Sir," Mordak reported, "the humans have somehow managed to defeat our psychological warfare through the simple tactic of not taking us seriously." "They're winning a battle by laughing at us," Zaltek said, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. "Yes, sir, and they're doing it completely by accident." For the first time in his military career, Zaltek was beginning to suspect that humanity might be the most dangerous species in the galaxy, simply because they were too irreverent to be properly intimidated. Supreme Commander Zaltek had reached his breaking point. After watching his fleet get systematically embarrassed by humans who treated interstellar warfare like a comedy show, he decided it was time to end this humiliation once and for all. The Zerathi had one weapon that had never failed to bring civilizations to their knees: the planet cracker World's End. The massive ship emerged from the center of the alien fleet like a floating cathedral of destruction. It was easily 3 times the size of any other vessel, its hull covered in weapon systems that could literally tear a planet apart from the inside out. This wasn't just a ship. It was a statement, a final, undeniable demonstration of Zerathi, power that no species could possibly mock or ignore. Zaltek stood on the command bridge of World's End, surrounded by his most senior officers. The weapons charging sequence would take exactly 60 seconds, during which the devastating energies building in the ship's core would be visible to every telescope on Earth. He wanted the humans to see their doom approaching, to understand the futility of their resistance, and most importantly, to stop making jokes about his military's naming conventions. "Open channels to all human frequencies," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "It's time to show these creatures what real power looks like." The transmission activated, and Zaltek stepped forward, his imposing, figure-filling screens across Earth's defense network. This would be his masterpiece, the speech that would finally silence human laughter and restore Zerathi dignity. "Pathetic humans," he began, his voice echoing across space. "You have mocked us for the last time. Behold the World's End, the ultimate expression of Zerathi technological superiority. In 60 seconds, your pitiful world will be reduced to cosmic dust, scattered across the void as a warning to any who dare oppose the Dominion." On Earth, in the underground command center that served as humanity's military headquarters, Admiral Cho Woo-young watched the alien commander's dramatic declaration with the weary expression of a man who had been dealing with this nonsense for hours. "Is he seriously going to monologue us to death?" Cho asked, genuine curiosity in his voice as he turned to his staff. The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but it was broadcast across the command center's communication system. Colonel Yang Min-ho, standing near the tactical display, shook his head in amazement. "I think he actually believes this is intimidating," he said. "Has anyone told him that the longer he talks, the more time we have to prepare countermeasures?" 50 seconds, Zaltek continued, apparently oblivious to the human response. "The stellar fires will consume your cities, your oceans will boil away into nothingness, and your species will be nothing but a footnote in the annals of galactic conquest." That's when Sergeant Song Tae-hyun, who had been monitoring alien communications from his post in the corner, decided to contribute to the conversation. "I've got 20 credits that says he doesn't actually fire it," he announced loudly enough for his microphone to pick up. "Think about it. They've been all talk and no action this whole time." Captain Oh Mi-young, reviewing damage reports from the ongoing battle, looked up with interest. 30 credits says he keeps talking past 0. On the countdown, these aliens love the sound of tea. Her own voice is too much to actually pull the trigger on time. 40 seconds, Zaltek declared, his voice rising with theatrical intensity. "Watch as we unleash forces beyond your comprehension, energies that dwarf the power of your pathetic." Star. Major Shin Yunji, who had been coordinating evacuation efforts, paused in her work to listen to the alien's speech. "You know what's funny?" she said into her headset. "He's basically giving us a detailed countdown of exactly when he's going to attack. What kind of military strategy is that?" "The kind that only works if your enemy is actually scared of you," replied Lieutenant Colonel Han So-young from her monitoring station. "Which, let's be honest, we're not. Aboard the World's End, Supreme Commander Zalthek was becoming increasingly aware that his ultimate psychological warfare weapon was being treated like a public entertainment event. The human communications network was buzzing with commentary, predictions, and what appeared to be actual betting on the outcome of his countdown. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "the humans are wagering on whether you'll actually fire the weapon." 30 seconds, Zalthek continued, but his voice was starting to lose some of its conviction. "Your world's destruction is inevitable. Nothing can save you from the cosmic judgment that approaches." "He's really committed to this whole cosmic theme," observed engineer Kim Hee-jin, whose repair work had left her accidentally connected to both human and alien communication networks. "I almost feel bad for ruining his big moment, but has anyone noticed that their ultimate weapon looks suspiciously like it was designed by the same people who named their attacks?" Lieutenant Bae Jun-seo, who had been providing running commentary on alien battle tactics throughout the engagement, decided this was the perfect moment for his impression of Zerathi military speeches. 20 seconds, he announced in an exaggerated, dramatic voice that perfectly mimicked Zalthek's tone. "Behold the sparkly beams of moderate inconvenience. Witness the mildly annoying lasers of slight discomfort. Your world will be reduced to, well, probably just some scorch marks, but really impressive ones." The laughter that erupted across the human communication networks was audible even on the alien flagship. Zalthek stood frozen at his command station, watching the countdown. Reach 15 seconds while listening to an entire species treat his ultimate weapon like a comedy routine. 10 seconds, he managed to say, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. "The stellar fires will what?" asked Admiral Cho, his voice carrying genuine interest. "You've got about 8 seconds left, so if you're going to finish that threat, now would be the time." Zalthek looked around his bridge, seeing the expectant faces of his officers. Then at the tactical display showing Earth floating serenely in space, completely undefended against his ultimate weapon. The planet cracker was fully charged, its devastating energies ready to reduce humanity's homeworld to rubble. And he couldn't do it. Not while they were betting on whether he'd actually pull the trigger. Not while they were making jokes about his weapon's name. Not while some human was doing impressions of his speeches that were, embarrassingly, pretty accurate. The countdown reached 0. The weapon remained unfired. "Sir?" his weapons officer asked quietly. "Should I activate the planet cracker?" Zalthek stared at the display showing Earth, a small blue marble that had somehow managed to defeat the greatest military force in the galaxy through the simple tactic of not taking it seriously. "Stand down," he said finally. "Open a channel." "To the Human Command Center." "Sir, I want to talk to them about that thing they mentioned, the stand-up comedy." 3 hours later, the war was officially over. Not through surrender or treaty, but through the most unprecedented request in galactic history. Supreme Commander Zalthek asking for political asylum on Earth so he could learn about human humor. It's turned out that after spending centuries conquering terrified civilizations, discovering a species that could find humor in everything was like finding water in a desert. The former galactic conqueror was fascinated by the idea that humans could turn any situation, no matter how dire, into material for jokes. Within 6 months, Zalthek was performing at comedy clubs across Earth, his act consisting entirely of his own failed attempts to intimidate humans. His impression of his old dramatic speeches became legendary, and his timing improved dramatically once he learned that pausing for laughter was more effective than pausing for dramatic effect. The Zerathi Dominion, meanwhile, became the galaxy's most unexpected source of comedic material. Once other species learned that the feared conquerors could be defeated by simply not taking them seriously, Zerathi military tactics became the subject of comedy shows across a dozen star systems, and humanity's reputation spread throughout the galaxy, the species so dangerous they could win wars by making their enemies laugh. It was a reputation that kept potential invaders away more effectively than any weapon ever could. The joke had literally become the punchline that saved the world, and possibly changed the entire galaxy's approach to warfare forever. Retry Claude can make mistakes,